All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight or watching this. If you're watching the recording, my name is Vinny Searcy, and I am the Director of People Personnel Services here for Norton. And tonight we're doing the financial aid basics for college students for our 11th and 12th grade students and families. And I'm very lucky once again to have Donald Kerr, who's the Director of Student Lending and College Services for AAA, here going over all of the information regarding financial aid. I think it's especially important this year with the change in the FAFSA and the not so great rollout, which he'll probably get into and explain from a personal perspective. But Donald has, I think this is either year 4 or 5 that you've helped me out in this realm, and your expertise is always welcome. And as I was saying to Donald in private, we've had some staff members who I've referred him to, and some other parents. One in particular tonight, who just I happened to be at a function with, who said he's been extremely helpful. So I'm sure at the end he'll go over how to contact him if you are interested in getting more information and need some support. So, Donald, thank you so much, and I always appreciate your expertise and your time. So, without further ado, I'll let you take over. And as usual, I might interrupt here and there with specifics to Norton, if you don't mind. But otherwise, I'm going to let you kind of run with this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Please, add to the presentation, build upon the things I'm doing and point things out that are specific for your families that they'll find helpful. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm always glad to do it and thankful to get in front of families and try to give them the information to get through this process of applying for financial aid and choosing that college, which is going to help determine your child's future success. So, I'll
For those who are watching us live, if you do have questions, you can put it in the Q&A or in the chat, and I will see them, and I'll make sure that we answer those. So feel free to ask questions either at the end or as we go along.
Okay. I am going to share my screen. Hmm. There we go. Okay, here comes my screen. And I'll pull up the presentation. Okay, can you see that okay? I don't
Yeah,
know
we
if I
can see
lost.
it fine.
You can see it? Okay, good, good. I
Yep.
thought I lost audio for a minute.
If
Okay,
you just want to
perfect.
hit hide,
There
there
we
you
go.
go.
All right. So we're going to go over financial aid basics tonight. Basically, how do you apply for financial aid? What are the timelines you need to be aware of, and then what kind of the next steps that happen after you apply for financial aid, so you guys can get a good understanding of what the process is. So I'm going to start with really just kind of a very broad overview of financial aid, and then I'm going to go into what I call the 3 easy step process on how to apply for financial aid. When you take it in these 3 easy steps, what can sometimes be an overwhelming process is really easy to approach. Um, and then once you filed financial aid, what's going to happen next? What are the next steps in the process, as well as additional resources that are out there? If you're having trouble going through the financial aid process, where can you get assistance with it? And I have enough time at the end. I'll cover one of my favorite subjects, cost saving ideas. How can you save with the cost of college these days? It is very expensive and getting more expensive every year, but you apply for financial aid. Hopefully that can offset some of the cost. And then what can you do additionally to try to save some money throughout that process? And financial aid is really what I call the gateway to financing or paying for school. It's something everybody should apply for. It's a process everybody should go through, because it really helps you pay the tuition bill when the time comes. Now, financial aid, breaks down to what we call need based aid. It's based on your financial need as a family or a household. And how they determine that is based on your household's income and your assets. So the financial aid applications are designed to look at that. Financial aid can come from lots of different resources. Primarily, your school gives you financial aid, but also state governments and federal governments can hand out financial aid. That's going to be the focus of my presentation here tonight. I'm going to focus on the financial aid aspect of it. In addition to financial aid, you can also get what's called merit aid. This is something that's done during the admissions process when you're applying for entrance to a college. So not only are you trying to, showcase yourself so you can get acceptance into that college, but you're also really showcasing yourself to try to say, hey, not to the school, not only do they want you to attend, but they can't live without you. If you can start to showcase yourself on the admissions process to that way, you can get merit aid based on academics, talent, athletics, character, families, anything really whatsoever that the college finds your student attractive to attend there. In any way your student is going to enhance that college. So when you apply for college, and you get those acceptance letters when they first come back, you're going to see merit aid. If you're going to be awarded any merit aid with the acceptance letter, they're going to also tell you what merit aid you've gotten. Then step two, you're going to go on and you're going to apply for a financial aid to see what additional help you can get. And of course, scholarships you can get outside by any private donors and any private organizations. That's a whole nother presentation that I talk about just how to search for scholarships, but absolutely a fantastic source of getting financial aid and assistance paying that tuition bill. So now that we know kind of what financial aid is, what is it made up of specifically? So financial aid is not just free money. Everybody hears that term financial aid, and it certainly sounds like free money. And it does consist of free money in the forms of what we call grants. But there are also financial aid work study and financial aid loans. And it's very important to know that because loans are that at the end of the day, things that you need to repay. And financial aid work study programs are fantastic, but it's money that's made and earned throughout the year. So most students traditionally don't get a paycheck at the end of the week and run down to the bursar's office and pay tuition. Certainly going to be welcome and it's going to help you cover expenses overall, but it's usually laundry money, things like that is where those funds are going to go to. Um, so it's not just the free money, certainly it is, but you really got to look at all the types of financial aid that you qualify for once you've gone through this process. Um, so the loans and grants, specifically to get a little bit more into the types of financial aid out there. There are federal loans. Today they're called the direct loan. In my day, it was called the Stafford loan. And it breaks down to a subsidized and unsubsidized direct loans. These are loans from the federal government that are going to be made directly in the student's name. Very good loans. If you have to borrow, you should absolutely use these types of loans first. They have the lowest interest rates, guaranteed to be approved. There's no credit check, no cosigners needed, and a ton of back end repayment benefits that exist because it's coming from the federal government. Things like public service forgiveness programs, teacher forgiveness programs, um, income-based repayment plans, as well as kind of built-in insurance plans. If you can't pay, there's plenty of assistance available with those loans. There is another federal type of loan called the PLUS loan for parents. Now, it's not necessarily a financial aid loan, but it is a good resource for parents to use. And sometimes some schools will list it on a financial aid offer letter just know it's a good loan you can use, but because it's a different type of loan, it is something you have to go out for as a parent and apply for. And they do check your credit to see if you're eligible for it. So it's not necessarily awarded to you, but it can be recommended to you by the school as a good loan to use. It's in the parent's name, very favorable repayment terms. Government sets their interest rate every year. May or may not be the lowest. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. It's one of those things you have to look at in every given year. What are the interest rates on these loans to see what your best options are? Um, there can also be a grad plus loan, which comes a little bit later on, not for an undergraduate level education, but once a student may be going on continuing their education to get their graduate degree, they can borrow a grad plus loan all in their name and will fully cover the entire cost of graduate school. Um, I always say when it comes to financial aid, as a parent on the undergraduate side, you're absolutely involved in the entire process. But as soon as a student gets to the graduate level, as a parent, you're off the hook. Everything is now done in the student's name. Um, and some of the grants that are out there that are available, there's what's called the Pell Grant, which is based on your financial need. In addition to that, you can also sometimes get state grants. In Massachusetts, there is the Mass State Grant that is available for people. Good news is, typically some of the deadlines for that could have been early, such as May 1st. But with some of the disruptions in the federal financial aid process this year, those deadlines have been extended for the Mass State Grant up until July 1st. So even though you may see some deadlines associated with some of these things because of the type of year we're having, a lot of exceptions to deadlines are being made, and the Mass State Grant is a perfect example for it. But you can also visit studentaid.gov, and they're going to give you a full list of all the different types of federal grants that are out there. These are just some of the more common ones and some of the ones people could be aware of. In addition to that, there are what we call private student loans and then private grants and scholarships. So most of this is not going to fall under financial aid. Private student loans are not part of financial aid, but there's something sometimes a school may recommend you to use once you've exhausted all your federal financial aid resources and scholarships. If you still have a portion left of the tuition to pay, some families look at private student loans. Just know they're things you need to carefully research on your own. Look at the interest rates. You want to know who the borrower is going to be. And they do require full credit checks, and it can impact your score in the long run as you start to take on private student loans. Um, Private grants and scholarships. Well, here's one where mostly you're going to find these outside of the school, but every now and then there will be schools that have their own grants that they offer based on financial need. Um, so you want to research any schools you may be thinking of attending to see if they offer any of these additional grants. Not every school has them, but some do. Private scholarships, again, something you can do outside of the financial aid process, something you should do now for when you're first thinking of attending college in that senior year, all the way until the student graduates. It's one of those things that can be a lot of work for a chance that you're going to get some money or win that award. But even if you win a couple of awards for a small amount of money, it can absolutely be worth it in the long run. Even winning a scholarship for $2,000 in the long term, if you minus that out from a loan and you look at a typical loan, which might have a 10-year repayment period, that $2,000 scholarship could have a realized savings for you of around $3,200 when all that interest adds up on that $2,000 loan over the course of those 10 years, if not more. So, absolutely look at scholarships. It's a great resource to help offset it. High schools can sometimes make great recommendations for scholarships. Colleges themselves also will make recommendations. They can go to their websites and they'll have resources for scholarships that you can look at or things that they recommend. But you can also absolutely do it on your own as well and should. So one of the myths I always get from people every year is, oh, I'm not going to apply for financial aid. I'm not going to qualify for anything. Absolutely everybody should apply for financial aid. Everybody, even Bill Gates, if he applies for it, his kids will get that low interest rate loan from the federal government. So everybody can get at least something. And some of the basic eligibility is up here, being a US citizen, high school diploma, enrolled at halftime. But probably the one that's the most common I see or run into all the time is maintaining satisfactory academic progress. So you're going to go through this whole process of applying for financial aid. You're going to get a financial aid offer, and you might use what a school is offering you as part of your decision on where to go to school. And maybe it's a generous financial aid offer, and you need that generous financial aid to be able to afford that school. So you go down that path, and the students attending, and in that first semester or that first year, their grades start to slip and they're not performing where they used to. Some of those scholarships and grants could be at jeopardy if a student falls below a certain GPA. So when you're going through the financial aid process and you're getting awarded and offered these scholarships and grants, read up on them and their eligibility. Do they have a minimum GPA a student must maintain? And if that student doesn't maintain that minimum GPA, is there a chance to get that scholarship back? Um, but more than ever, this year has been a very challenging year where they've completely redone the FAFSA form. Now, has certainly caused a lot of issues and delays. I know it's certainly been all over the news, and parents have encountered the frustrations hands on, similar to what I have. But part of the whole intent of this was really to make the FAFSA form simpler and try to do good things. And one of the good things they've done is they've increased the eligibility for Pell Grant. So that grant that I talked about earlier on in the slide, they are now expecting that additional 610,000 families are going to qualify for some type of Pell Grant. And they're expecting another 1.5 million families are going to get a full Pell Grant as a result of the changes they've put into place this year. So net result, if you do that out, that is literally billions of dollars more in financial aid available. So it's been a very difficult process, but there could be a little pot of gold at the rainbow. The changes were done for the better or the intent of the better. Why the execution may not have been there. Um, don't give up as a family. There's certainly a lot of additional financial aid that's available as a result of the changes. So, um, how to file? What is the application to file for financial aid? Now that you know what it is, how do you do it? You need to fill out what is called the FAFSA form. Every college will require you to fill out the FAFSA form if you want to get financial aid. Good news is this FAFSA form is used at all three levels that I talked about earlier. So it's the gateway. You're going to submit one application for financial aid. That application is going to go to the federal government, the state government, and the college to see what you qualify for. And it's free to file. So there's no cost to file the FAFSA form, no money out of your pocket. It's absolutely worth doing it. But that is the number one form everybody has to fill out at every college. In addition to that form, there's a second application for financial aid. Not every college asks for this second one, but there's around 250, mostly private colleges that want you to fill out a second form called the CSS profile form. This one is not free to file. It costs a little bit of money, not a lot, but about $25 for every school. So there's only 250 schools that want this form filled out. You can find out if the colleges you're thinking of attending want this form in one of two ways. The most direct is you just go to the college board, which is where you fill out the form, and they're going to have a list of all the colleges in alphabetical order that want this form. You can also visit the college's individual website, go to the financial aid section, and they're going to tell you what forms you need to fill out to apply for financial aid. Um, it's a little more work and a little more cost. But again, there's good news. At the end of it, the schools that are asking for the CSS profile form, they tend to have bigger financial aid budgets. They have more money to hand out. So it may be more work, but it could get you more financial aid in the end, which is always a good thing. But those are the two main forms you need to fill out. So since the FAFSA form is one absolutely everybody has to fill out, that's where I'm going to put the emphasis of the presentation on is the FAFSA form. So filling it out, really the structure of your family is now the key. And there've definitely been some changes to how they look at your family structure and who fills out the FAFSA form this year. So who needs to fill it out? Absolutely the student, 100% of the cases, the student needs to fill out the FAFSA. But who in their household, which parents need to fill it out? They now have changed the terminology from a parent to call them a contributor. So you need to determine who the student's contributors to the FAFSA form are going to be. Pretty simple. If you got a parent who's single, never been married, they're the contributor. If you have unmarried parents, um, adults living together, you could have a situation where you have married, remarried families. You can have situations where the family is maybe married but files separate tax returns. In a situation like that, you would have two parent contributors because they each have an individual tax return they need to attach. But in the case where you have two parents, they're both married, they do their taxes married filing jointly, you're only going to list one contributor or one parent to fill out the FAFSA form. So you have to look at the situation and determine who's going to be a contributor. Where in the past it was just simply who is the parent? Do they live with that parent? It was pretty cut and dry. Now it's a little more complicated, but designed to address multiple situations that can exist in families these days. But one of the more complicated ones are the divorced or separated parents. That's always been an issue. There were huge changes in this one. In the case of a divorced or separated family, only one parent is going to need to fill out the FAFSA form. In the past, that was always who the student lives with. Now it doesn't necessarily matter who the student lives with. What they're going to look at is which parent provides the most financial support for that student. Regardless of the living arrangements, that's the parent whose information will be contributed to the FAFSA. So the student could be living with dad, but mom contributes the most financially to the student. Mom will be the one who needs to fill out the FAFSA form with the student. Um, Lots of these things are going to be separate or different when it comes to the CSS profile. So just keep that in mind that everything we're talking about is just solely for the FAFSA form. So that's who needs to fill it out. Now, when do you need to fill it out? When do you need to get this FAFSA form done? So traditionally, these financial aid forms open up around October 1st. So anybody who has a senior in high school right now, you should have been able to fill out the form on October 1st, but the form was delayed this year, and unfortunately, it didn't get released until January. But anybody who's got a junior in high school right now, put October 1st on your calendar. October 1st of this year is when you can start to apply and fill out these forms. You don't have to race out there and do them on October 1st. That's just when it becomes available. What you really want to do is you want to research what's called your priority deadline date from the financial aid office at every school you're thinking of applying to. They're going to have the earliest date. And as long as you have your FAFSA form filled out by that date, you're going to be in good shape. No harm in getting it done. The sooner the better. Um, so you want to go out and do it on October 1st. There's absolutely no issue with doing that. Um, then January to March, that's when you're going to receive acceptance. You start getting your congratulation letters. Hey, you've been accepted to our next class. You've applied for a financial aid, kind of overlap those two. And then in the springtime, based on you applying and asking for financial aid, the colleges make you an offer of financial aid. So that is also a process that's been tremendously delayed this year. Even my own son, who's my youngest son, is applying for college. Just yesterday, got his first financial aid award letter because the process has been so delayed this year. Thankfully, a lot of the schools have extended their deadlines because traditionally May 1st is what we call decision day deadline. By May 1st, you usually have to make a deposit to the college you're going to save your student's seat. That deadline for some schools has been extended out to June 1st. Some have extended it to May 15th, while others have stuck hard to that May 1st deadline with all the delays that have happened this year. But if you're in that position, you can always ask for an individual extension. And schools have been pretty flexible with the families that I've seen ask for those extensions this year. They're willing to work with you. Maybe you have 6 financial aid award letters, but you're waiting on one more. They might be able to give you a 2-week extension. Um, then the last thing on the timeline is funding the education. Believe it or not, that doesn't really come till a lot later in the process. June, July, August. You're going to get a bill from the college maybe around June or July, and it's going to be payable July, August, maybe even as late as September. So keep this timeline in mind, and it'll help you really navigate through all the different steps of the process so you know what's going to happen when and what your next steps are. So now I'm going to get into the kind of the 3 easy steps to applying and filling out this FAFSA form. The first thing you got to do is gather your information. The most important thing you're going to need is your 2022 federal income tax returns. So this is again for anybody who has a senior who's in high school right now. They're filling out their FAFSA forms with 2022 tax information. Anybody who has a junior in high school right now, when you're filling out the FAFSA form, you will be using your 2023 federal tax returns. Now, it's not required, but some of the changes they've made this year were really fantastic. That if all goes well, you're not going to need your federal tax returns at all. But you should have them handy in case you need to refer them. There are some exceptions that I've seen this year where you may need to look at it for a question or two. And then you're going to want to gather information on your your assets and your cash. So non-retirement assets and investments. So if you have stocks or bonds, 529 college savings plans, things that are not in retirement accounts, you need to know what those balances are. Checking and savings accounts, you're going to need to know what the balances are on those for everybody. And you're going to need to know this information for both the student and who's ever a contributor into that FAFSA form. So I know it's weird with the tax returns, but this is what we call using your prior year tax data. It's kind of a 2-year look back on your tax returns. Um, and it helps with the financial aid process. And I know there can be some unique situations that occur, maybe where your prior year tax data doesn't reflect your current situation or your current income earnings. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later towards the end of my presentation on how to deal with those situations. So the biggest thing I get every year, or the biggest mistakes I see every year that families make, are what are they including when it comes to these assets you have to put in? So the big things you do not include when you're listing your assets in the FAFSA form is the equity in your primary residence. That is a protected or excluded asset. You're not going to include that. If you have whole life insurance that has a cash surrender value, you do not include that. Grandparents, maybe they're holding on to some savings for the student. A new change this year is you're not going to have to worry about things a grandparent may be contributing. Retirement plans are the biggest one. Any retirement plans whatsoever, pensions, 401ks, 403s, pensions, annuities, IRAs, anything at all that's in a retirement plan is an excluded asset. You do not put that value into the FAFSA form. So, what are you going to put in there? You're going to put in things like rental properties. If you had a vacation home, a rental property, a second home, you now have to include the equity in those second properties. The non-retirement investment. So if you have a stock or a bond that's invested, maybe you have an advisor, a financial advisor, and you've just given them a sum of money to invest and it's not in retirement, you're going to need to include that. Checkings and savings accounts. Um, don't see these too much anymore, but sometimes you get universal gift to minor accounts and universal transfer to minor accounts that maybe parents set up when their child was younger. But things like money markets, CD, certificate of deposits, mutual funds, all those types of things you are going to have to include. And specifically that 529 college savings plan. But I always like to point out with that, one of the biggest things with the 529 college savings plan is it is treated as a parental asset, not a student's asset. So yeah, you got to put in the student's checking and savings accounts if the student has money markets or CDs. But if you've started a 529 savings plan in that student's name, it is going to go on the parent side of the FAFSA form. Um, Reason being, it's a parent asset, and there's different weights to the assets that get assigned in these financial aid formulas that get used. And parent assets have a lesser weight, and a student asset has a heavier weight. Um, so that's a bit about gathering the information that you're going to need to go ahead and fill out the FAFSA form. Probably the most important thing other than that you're going to need to do is creating usernames and passwords. So each person who needs to fill out the FAFSA form is going to want to go to the federal government's website, studentaid.gov, and you're going to want to go over here where it says create an account, and you're going to need to create an account for the student, and then you're going to need to go out and create account for anybody who needs to contribute their financial information into the FAFSA form. In the case of parents that are married and they're married filing jointly, only one parent needs to create a username and password. You only have to do it for two if there are separate contributors outside of the household or outside of the tax situation. That's really what they're looking at. When you're a contributor, they want to get your tax information. But if you're married filing jointly, it's all the same tax info. So you get a little bit of a break there. But this is the look and feel you should see when you go to the website so you're familiar with it. When you go here, you can simply click on Get Started. They are going to have a list of all the information that you'll need. I'm going to cover some of those things as well, but they'll repeat it. So right before you fill out and try to apply for an ID, they'll go over all the stuff you need beforehand. Um, Very important that this is done because another huge change that's caused some delays this year is they've changed the way you can access the account based on your username and password. In the past, you could go out, create a username and password, and then instantly you could go in and start filling out the FAFSA form. Not anymore. Now, what they do is once you've created your username and password, they're going to run background checks, which they did before. They're going to check you against the Social Security Administration to make sure you are who you say you are. And once you're cleared from those background checks, they now allow you at that point to go in and start to complete and fill out the FAFSA form. Those background checks could take 3, 5 business days for that to happen. So there's now a delay. You fill out your ID and get an ID and it's established. You might not be able to use it for 3 to 5 business days. Meaning you can't fill out the FAFSA form for 3 to 5 days. So they will send you an email once you create your username and ID. You're going to get an email coming from the Social Security Administration saying, "Hey, congratulations, you've passed and you've been matched, and you can now start using your ID and password." Um, so very important you get this ahead of time before filling out the FAFSA, and make sure you're doing it for anybody who's going to put information in there. It's 100% required, but it's also used for other things down the road. It's used for securing student loans when it comes to federal student loan repayment. There are things student needs to do called entrance counseling exams to get financial aid from the federal government. They're going to need a student aid and ID, this FSA ID, to get that done. So make sure to create that account. The most basic information you're going to need is date of birth, social security number, email addresses, and cell phone numbers. Permanent address, not a temporary address associated with a college, but you want to always use the student's home permanent address. And then they ask you to set up challenge questions as well. So, a couple of things that are very, very critical that I've seen this year when you're making your username and password, you're going to be setting up this account with all this information, email, phone numbers, your address. You need to make sure everything you're entering onto your username and password account, when you go to fill in your FAFSA form, every single data field has to match exactly what you put in your account. And if something does not match, you're going to get a lot of the errors a lot of families have been encountering this year. And they've been getting blocked and haven't been able to complete their FAFSA form and move forward with it. And I've had to work with families and sit down, and we've got to pull up their account information and go through it line by line and look to see what they're entering in the FAFSA form line by line, and everything needs to match. So pay very, very close attention when you're setting up your username and password, especially things like email, right? Maybe you're doing your student's email and you're using an email from the high school that's been set up. And then you go to fill out the FAFSA form later on and you use the student's Gmail account. Well, and right there, you're going to get blocked. You're going to get an error message, and you're not going to be able to proceed. So, my best advice is never use the high school email address. Some of those things can get turned off and shut off later down the line, and you're not even going to be able to get access to it. Um, so
Yeah,
make sure
Donald, I was
you're
going to say
yeah,
that we have told the students over and over again for any of their college information, whether it's their FAFSA, obviously for what you just described is extremely important. But even when they go and fill out their applications and so forth, not to use our high school, their school email address, because the moment they graduate, usually that summer it gets shut off and there's no more access to it. So we encourage our students actually to create a college specific email, so that all of
right.
this stuff doesn't get lost in their larger email that, you know, that they've had since they were 12, that gets all the junk email that is really specifically, when we talk to our sophomores and our juniors, even those that are beginning to explore colleges, to create a, you know, a VCERC college Gmail account, you know, or something like that, so that when you're getting college information, and when the colleges are reaching out or when you're doing FAFSA, it's very specific to that topic, and it none of this gets lost in translation somewhere else. So
Perfect. Yeah, that's a fabulous idea. I like setting up that unique account, and that's a great thing to use. Um, but also double check your information. A typo here is going to cause a lot of pain down the line. And then my IT people would absolutely cringe if I say this, but record your username and password somewhere, somewhere safe. But you're going to use this once a year for the next 4 years. You have to fill out this FAFSA form every year. And something you don't use only once a year, you're going to forget it. You're going to forget what your username and password is. So write them down however you do, but make sure they're in a secure place so you're not, exposing any of your financial information that goes into the FAFSA form. You do want to be very, very cautious with it, but it's definitely very easy to forget as well.
Yeah, one of
Um,
the things too that we encourage there is set up a code so you know what it might mean. Like you could say, I don't know, I'm just making some the anniversary date, right? Like something that you'll remember, but doesn't have the exact information. Sometimes we've been trying to talk to the kids about that idea too. Like instead of just writing down the exact password, is there a way that you can kind of remember it through some kind of code that if somebody got a hold of it, they wouldn't necessarily know what it means.
yeah, no, then that's a really good suggestion. Because you can't be too safe these days with your data and trying to protect it. Um, One of the common mistakes I see all the time too is I'll see parents try to put in their email address when they're creating the student's account because, typical students, maybe they're not checking emails on financial aid. So the parent wants it so they can stay on top of things and make sure no deadlines are being missed. You actually can't do that. You have to use separate emails for each individual account that's created. So a parent might start off using their email for the student's account, then they go to create their account and they're stuck. They can't use their own email anymore. They have to use something completely different. So stick to the student's email and the parent's email because you have to as well. Um, you know, and when you're setting up that password, they don't allow you to use personal information. So you can't use, your name, parts of your name, your last name, parts of your social security number, dates of birth. So they've gotten very secure with the password formats as well, which is fantastic. But the other reason why you really need to keep all this stuff separate is one of the things they've done with the login process this year is that when you go to log in and you enter your correct username and password, you used to instantly get into the FAFSA form and could start filling it out. Now they don't do that. They're now added a two-factor authentication to the login process. So when the student logs in, they're going to text a code to the student's cell phone number, or they're going to email a code to the student's email address that you put in on that account. And you now have to go ahead, retrieve that code, and enter it before you're actually allowed to get into the FAFSA form. Even though you got the right username and password, there's that additional step. And if you don't have access to those emails, you may not even be able to get into the FAFSA form, even though you have the right username and password. Um, that's also another issue that I've had this year is that, traditionally sometimes parents may try to fill out the majority of the FAFSA form with the student's username and password. Well, they can't even get into the student sections anymore without the student being able to retrieve those security codes and supply them at the login process. So it's kind of important to make sure the student and the parent contributor are doing this jointly together this year to get into the process. That's another thing parents have found very frustrating this year because it's a new change from the way they've done things in the past. But when you're ready to apply, you've got your username and password, it's all set up, you know what it is. You're going to go to this site, studentaid.gov, and you're going to click on start a new form for the 24-25 FAFSA form. The sections are done individually within the application, which is another huge change this year. So the FAFSA form used to be just essentially one long form with both student information and parent information. It has now been separated into a student section and a separate parent section. So when you're doing it, you're gonna have to do it separately with the login. So the student is gonna need to go into their section, log in, complete their section, and then during that part of the FAFSA form, they actually send an invitation to their parent, an email invitation to their parent to access the FAFSA form and complete their section. Parent can then go out, open that invitation. The parent then needs to log in with the parent username and password and create and finish the parent section. Now, you can do it both ways. A parent could go in first, start to fill out the parent section, and invite the student to apply. But the student can also go in, fill out their section, and invite the parent to apply. It works both ways, but it's definitely separated this year. So um, the other big thing they changed is when you're doing the FAFSA application, instead of having to enter or download all of your tax data, they now have this new consent and approval process where you're basically giving your consent to the IRS to release or link your tax data into the FAFSA form. It's a fabulous process. It saves you a ton of work, um, but it's something you have to agree to. So what I recommend, because they've separated this process this year, is try to sit down and do it in one single session. Sit down with the student and the parent, have either one start their part of the process, fill it out, and then immediately together go right into the second section and fill that out. And have that financial aid information that we talked about you were gathering earlier, have it handy. Make sure it's sitting by your computer somewhere so it's ready to go. This is what the login section looks like, just so you can be familiar with the look and feel. There are sections for in case you do forget your username and password, you can recover it. But that entire recovery process is, guess what? It's based upon your email and your phone number when you created the account. So, yet another reason why having an accurate email in there that you have access to is critical in case you forget it and you need to recover it. It's going to help you out. But this is what the consent and approval form looks like. Actually, only part of it because it's a really long form and I couldn't fit it all onto one screen. So you're going to see this early on when you're completing the FAFSA. Both sections, the student and the parent section, are going to ask you to sign the consent and approval. You have to click approve. They give you no other choice. If you do not click approve, you cannot fill out the FAFSA form. You get no results. So you can read through that long form to get yourself familiar with it. But basically, what it says in a nutshell is you're giving consent to share your tax data into the FAFSA form and into the schools. Good news is it's going to fill in 80% of your financial information comes out of your tax returns and it goes into the FAFSA. Um, it's also verified. So the school now has a degree of certainty that this information came from the IRS. They don't have to worry about audit. They don't have to worry about misinformation. They know it's accurate. When they give you a financial aid offer, they know that financial aid offer is going to be accurate. So why did I ask you to get your 1040s ahead of time if they have this process? You may still need to go to it. I've seen some exceptions this year where there can be cases where you still have to go into your tax return and enter information. They have your tax data behind the scenes, and sometimes what's in your tax data can trigger additional questions to be asked. So, for example, maybe one of the parent contributors in 2022, they got a new job. They transferred from one job to another and they rolled over their retirement plans from one company to another company. Well, that can show up on your tax returns when you do a rollover. Even you didn't take the money out, it could show up on your tax returns. It's noted as a rollover on your tax returns. That can get caught during this linking process and see that you have a rollover that could potentially be listed as income. Now, a new field is going to pop up to make sure that that rollover is being treated properly. But if your family doesn't have a rollover, you're never going to see this field. So if that field pops up, you might have to go to your tax return and look at those fields they're asking you to fill out. They may ask you specifically to go to line 5B and 5A and look at the numbers that are there. So it's always a good idea to have it. That's just one example, but I've run into a few situations where we've had to go back to them. All goes well. You don't need what I told you to get earlier. That's the best case scenario. But if you happen to be in one of these unique situations, you're going to be all set and ready to go. So some helpful hints when you're filling out the FAFSA form. You can enter up to 20 schools at the same time. I'm by no means encouraging you to go out and enter 20 schools. They just give you up to 20 schools to list. You want to really try to stick to the schools you're applying to. But if you have a couple that are under consideration, maybe you're borderline, I think I might apply to these schools, but I'm not really sure yet. List them in the FAFSA form. It's free to file. Putting schools in there, it's no harm, no cost to you. And even maybe later down the road, maybe your child decides, after one semester, they want to transfer to one of those other schools. They will already have your FAFSA information. But if you don't, maybe you just stuck strictly to those schools you're applying to, you can go back into the FAFSA form later and add the schools. Again, that's a very easy process under normal circumstances. However, this year, with a lot of the delays, there was a good window of time where families were not allowed to edit the FAFSA form, meaning they could not go back and add a college if they wanted to. So my recommendation is if you're thinking about it, it's a borderline and you're just not sure yet, add it this year. Don't start just throwing schools down for the sake of it, but definitely make sure you've got all the schools that are in that possibility because it could be an issue this year going back and adding a school. Normally it's not, but better safe than sorry. And then we talked about the 529. Make sure you enter that as a parent's asset. Everybody complete the FAFSA form. When it comes to financial aid questions on the FAFSA form, anything related to your finances, specifically if it's a numerical response they're looking for, put in a zero. Don't just leave that field blank. So there could be questions on the FAFSA form that are, you know, do you have any farms or investment businesses? I don't see any students that really have investment farms or running farms or invested in any businesses anywhere. Put a zero in that field. Don't leave it blank. If you have multiple students, unfortunately, you have to do this student by student. So you're going to have to sign in as each individual student and send an invitation to each parent. And then that parent's going to have to go in twice for each invitation they receive and fill out their section. Um, they're hopeful they'll have a process in the future where one parent will be able to send their data into multiple students. But right now, it's something you've got to do um, individually for each student. So why are you going to apply, right? Why are you going to apply for financial aid? Go through this process. You can get grants and scholarships and financial aid loans. You're going to put in all this information into this FAFSA form. You're going to submit your FAFSA form. What is it going to get you? What are the results? What comes out of it? So, most important piece that comes out of the FAFSA form is something called your student aid index. This was formerly called your expected family contribution. It's a number that every family hates and every family disagrees with, including myself when I did it for my own son. Um, but it is the number that is the bottom line result of the FAFSA form, and it is the number that determines your financial need. So remember, we talked early in the presentation that financial aid is based on your financial need. So now that you've filled out all these applications, all these numbers on your income and your assets have been crunched into this magical formula. The colleges are going to use it in this very, very simple manner to determine your financial need. So I have three schools listed here. You can see there's vastly three different costs. School B, maybe it's a state school. It's only around $30,000 a year. School A on this example could be an out of state college and it's costing around 55,000 a year. School C, it's a private college and that's costing around $80,000 a year. So the way the schools use this student aid index when they get the results of your FAFSA, they all look at your number. It's all treated the same. Your student aid index is 17,164 at all three schools. But what they do is they subtract that from the cost of the school. That numbers that's left is your financial need. And this is going to be very important. So you can look, your student aid, excuse me, student aid index is the same at all schools, but at school C, your financial need is $63,000 a year. That's a very, very strong financial need. That school, you're likely to get a lot of financial aid or a lot of help paying that tuition bill from that school. School B, where you've got a very small financial need, $12,000, yeah, that's still some financial need. Maybe you might get a little bit of help from that school. In school A, you're kind of in between, right? Your financial need is 37,000. So now maybe you end up somewhere in between. So that's really the end result, why you're applying for a financial aid. So the schools can determine your financial need in this simple formula and then determine how much financial aid they're going to give you. So when you're gonna get that? When you're gonna find out what you're getting from each individual school? So after you file the FAFSA form, traditionally you're gonna get a confirmation email letting you know it's been successfully filed. The schools get that student aid index number, and they use it to drive the entire process and create a financial aid award letter. Now, a financial aid award letter is very important because this is going to be the first time you're looking at a comprehensive list of financial aid you are qualifying for from the college, from the state government, if any, and from the federal government. So we talked about earlier in the presentation, your FAFSA form gets you aid from all three levels. The letter that comes from the college is going to tell you what you get from all three levels, if anything. Um, this year, it's been very, very critical because of the delay in the process. Financial aid award letters have been really delayed from schools because the FAFSA form has had a lot of delays. So typically, they go out in the mail. They arrive, in the post office, delivered in your mailbox. You can open the envelope and read it, but they also go out via email directly to the student. The fastest place you can see it is on the school's portal. So if you've applied to a college and you've got accepted and you're awaiting a financial aid award offer, have the student go out to that college's website and sign up for the student based portal. The second the financial aid offer is ready, that's the first place you're going to see it. Very critical this year. That's where people are going out to see their financial aid offers the fastest. So now you've gotten a financial aid offer from the school. Maybe you're comparing different schools. Hey, this school's offering me this amount. This school's offering me this amount. Um, you can appeal your financial aid award letter. So I talked about earlier, we're going to be the FAFSA form for people this year is looking at your 2022 federal tax returns. Well, maybe you've got some special circumstances. Maybe something unfortunate has happened. Maybe a parent that listed good income in 2022 has lost a job, or maybe they've had their hours reduced at work, so their income is less. Or maybe something unfortunate. There could be unfortunate medical circumstances that have caused a parent's income to be reduced due to illness. So you can absolutely and should go to your school's financial aid office, let them know that you have special circumstances and your income now is not reflective of what was on your 2022 tax returns. They absolutely have the authority and the ability to go in and make adjustments and lower your student aid index, which will increase your financial need and potentially give you more financial aid. So be aware there is that process that exists out there and you can go through it. Every year too, I also get some families ask me, well, nothing has changed, but is there processes I can do to ask for more financial aid from my schools? And the bottom line answer is yes, in certain circumstances you can. So I work with families all the time that'll do this. My own nephew did this at a school he was going to. He got a financial aid offer, but his family could not afford it. Going to that school, it was the most expensive school they had on his list, but he really wanted to go there. Once he got a financial aid offer and he got some merit offer, he went back 4 times and he said, "Hey, thank you for your generous offer. I really still can't afford it. It's going to be a struggle for my family. Is there any more you can do?" They came back and they offered him $2,000 more. He did that 4 times. The first 3 times, they gave him $2,000 every time. So when all was said and done, they gave him $6,000 more per year for financial aid simply because he asked and he asked in the right way. That's not always going to be the case. I've had families I work with that have asked for financial aid and they have asked 10 different people at the school for more financial aid, never got a dime. Wrote fantastic letters, appeals. There are so many variables that determine the success when you try that type of an appeal. My advice is never hurts to ask. Um, the least they're going to do is say no, and you won't get any less than what you have. They will never take away what you've already been offered, but specifically really know if you have special circumstances where your income has been reduced, you've got a good chance of successfully appealing. Everybody else, it's really case by case. If you just want to ask for more, sometimes you're going to be successful, sometimes you won't. So, one of the last things I have here is just a sample of a financial aid award letter, what they typically look like. And why I wanted to cover this is there's a couple things you look at, right? When you're looking at financial aid award letters from different schools, they're all going to look slightly different, but you want to try to key in on some couple things. So if you notice on this financial aid award letter, which I consider very good, they split it out. They show you grants and scholarships in this first category. That's a fabulous way to do it because grants and scholarships are free money that does not get repaid. That's the best type of financial aid that's out there. And then they break it down to the second category, financial aid loans that they're offering you. Yes, they're low interest rate loans from the government. And yes, you can see here the portion of this is a subsidized loan, meaning the government is taking care of the interest while the student is in school on that loan. It's still a loan at the end of the day that has to be repaid. Then a good financial aid award letter is also going to show you their estimated costs. Important to know here, and this is another great award letter, which is why I use this sample, is they break down the costs into two main categories. Direct costs, meaning you're going to get a bill for these costs, and then indirect costs, which are associated with the cost of education, but you don't get a bill for them. So you will get a bill for tuition, all the fees that college is charging, room and board, housing and meal plans, but things like books, supplies, transportation, miscellaneous costs, you don't get those. So you don't get a bill for them. So this school lists indirect cost for books of $1,100 and then transportation and other costs, $800. These may not be real cost to you. Maybe for books, you decide to go out and you decide to rent books instead, or maybe even share a book. That's one thing my son did. He's an engineering student. He was sharing his dorm room with another engineering student. They were taking the same class, different times. They decided to share the book. They rented the book and they split the cost of renting that book between them. And they were able to work out a schedule. So you may not pay $1,100. Other educational costs, 350 this school has listed, you may not pay that. They want you make you aware you're going to have could have these costs, but you don't get a bill for them. The other great thing I love with this sample award letter is they show you a way to pay for the bill that doesn't involve financial private student loans or anything like that. So private student loans or even that plus loan I talked about earlier, they're all going to come with what we call interest charges on the loan. So this very good financial aid award letter, you can now quickly take away the total costs of the school minus your financial aid. And you can now see, hey, out of pocket, I've got to come up with, roughly $22,000. This school is showing you, hey, if you're fortunate enough to have a cash flow, you can break down and pay the school $2,188 a month for 10 months. So you don't have to pay that 21,000 up front out of pocket, but they'll allow you to split that cost out over the year and divide it into 10 equal payments. Good thing about this is there's no interest charges. Very difficult maybe to come up with $2,100, $2,200 a month they're asking for here. But if you could afford, let's just say $500 a month, maybe consider doing a partial payment plan. And if you're only paying now out of, instead of, looking at a $22,000 loan you have to borrow, you're going to do a payment plan for $500 a month. You reduce the loan you have to borrow by $5,000. That doesn't seem like a lot. But again, if you take a $5,000 reduction in a loan, a $5,000 loan with 4 years of interest adding up while the student's in college, and then a standard 10-year repayment plan, by reducing your loan you have to borrow by $5,000, you realistically may have saved $8,500, $9,000 in real savings over those interest charges over the life of the loan. So another good reason why I like this award letter is you can see some other options that exist for paying the tuition bill when the time comes. But if we think back to that sample where you talk about how the school factors your different financial need, and this is going to be a true example that I use with my son, my oldest son, who's now been out for 2 years of college and in the workforce. When he applied, he had 6 colleges. 3 colleges were in the range of around 35,000 a year for their cost. The other 3 colleges were in the range of $60,000 to $65,000 a year. That was their big cost, right? But when I went through the financial aid process and I got 6 financial aid award letters, and I did this and I subtracted the cost from what that school was offering me, my net cost lining up all 6 award letters, the biggest out of pocket difference, it was no greater than around $2,000. So to go to a school that was starting at $35,000 a year versus a school that was starting at $65,000 a year, factor in financial aid, my out of pocket cost were only $2,000 more to go to that more expensive school. Again, the reason being is the way the formula works, and we had a stronger financial need at that college. So I say to everybody, um, you know, never ever at this stage of the game rule out a college based on their net cost. They're saying, hey, we're going to cost 65,000 a year. Don't at this early stage say, hey, we're not going there. We can't afford it. If it's a college your student can get into, a college your student's going to be successful at, wait till you get the financial aid offer. Yes, that absolutely could be the case. Maybe you're not getting a lot of financial aid and you can't afford that college, but go through this process before you rule it out, because you will be surprised. Some of the more expensive colleges can offer more financial aid to make it affordable to go there. And if you don't even consider it out of the gate, you're really kind of doing a disservice. You know, be prepared to have that conversation that we might not be able to afford it, but don't rule it out because you could be surprised on how much financial aid. And that's why you're going to go through this whole process to see, you know, how you can afford it. Um, Now, there are resources. You're going to go through this
Donald,
financial
can
aid
we just
process.
go one back? I noticed on that you had
Sure.
work study. I think sometimes
Oh,
kids
good.
and family get a little confused about, work study and, oh, it says 2,500 bucks. So I'm definitely getting 2,500 bucks. One
Yep.
that if you work the hours, right? So the kids themselves have to do the hours, which, they don't always do. I'll trade my shift. Oh, I won't. And then, what hours are available. So it's up to
Right.
$2,500. It doesn't guarantee $2,500. I've run
Yeah.
into that on a couple of occasions with kids who have come back and were upset about it. And I'm like, so I think we just clarify that. You know what I mean? It's like having a part time job. If the hours are available, you get in early enough, right? Some kids wait to the end. They're the last ones. Oh, we only have this available left. Or they don't work all their required hours or those kinds of things.
Right, exactly, and I think that's a great thing to point out on this letter, why this is a great award letter. They've separated out where that
Mhm.
work study is. They put it down at the bottom, so they're still offering it to the student, but it's not factored in when you pay the tuition bill. Some colleges, when they do their award letter,
Exactly.
they will take the work study and they will list it up here in this first section. If you see that, I say just cross it out and then recalculate the financial aid offer and look at your bottom line number with that subtracted. This school was great and they subtracted out, but a lot of schools put it in the award letter, and it's not, like you said, it's not guaranteed, and it absolutely never goes to pay tuition. The student does do their work study hours and they actually get that paycheck at the end of the week. They're buying pizza with it. They're going out to a restaurant on the weekend. It's maybe entertainment at a movie. It's laundry money. It's all those expenses. So, like I say, less phone calls home to mom and dad saying, "I need more money," um, but you can't count on it. Um, so good to get. Just don't rely on it. But yeah, great shout out there. I almost missed that one. Um, so where you can get help, college or university, the financial aid office, great resources to help you get through it. I've referred people there a lot this year, especially with some of the issues. A lot of families have wanted to get confirmation that the college has received it. And they've had a lot of helpful hints for helping families navigate the process. You can also go directly to the US Department of Education, so studentaid.gov. You can call them, you can do live chats. They have AI, artificial intelligence chatbots, so you can type in your subject matter and they can go to some very common responses to help you get through it. Um, Unfortunately, they've been very overwhelmed this year with the process that's happened this year. I've found a live chat to be pretty easy to get a hold of somebody, whereas if I'm trying to call them on the phone, I may be in a pretty long wait queue and may have an hour or 2 hour wait before I get a live person on the phone. But live chat, I've been pretty successful and I've gotten pretty good responses. So the U.S. Department of Education does have great tools. They also have lists of all the information you need. So, I covered that earlier in my presentation, but if you've forgotten, they have resources where you can go through it and get ready before you fill out the FAFSA form. We can also help you as well. AAA Northeast, we do provide this service for our members at no cost. We don't charge anything. If you just have a question on the FAFSA form, something that wasn't covered here tonight, or if you need help getting by some of these unique errors that have happened this year, we can assist you with that. So you can reach me directly at the number that's listed there, the 800-422-2536. I'm happy to answer questions anytime. You can also email me directly at dkerr, DKERR, at aaanortheast.com. Again, happy to answer any questions via email, or if you want to reach out to me and you want me to call you at a specific time with more for a more detailed conversation, happy to do that. I'm trying to get my son through the financial aid process this year, my last, thankfully. So I'm always happy to help any family get through the financial aid process in any way, shape, or form I can. So um, thank you for attending or viewing this recording. I appreciate you taking your time out of your schedule to go through this. Hopefully, you found the information useful. You now know what financial aid is, how to apply for, and what's going to kind of happen at the end. Um, I know sometimes I like to cover ways to save on that college tuition. We talked about one of them earlier with how to save on textbooks, but one that I think is I want to point out just quickly is there's something called the New England Board of Higher Education that offers a regional tuition discount. And again, I'm going to use my son as an example because he took advantage of this. So what this organization does is if you want to attend a state school in the state you live in, say you live in Massachusetts, and you want to attend the state school, and they do not offer the major your student wants to study, but that particular major is offered by one of our surrounding state schools in New England. You know, it's offered by Maine, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, whatever the state, that state school offers it. You can attend that state school and you can pay a discounted tuition rate because that major is not offered in the state school in which you live in. So my son wanted to be a mechanical engineering technology major. Live in Massachusetts. Certainly, UMass offers a lot of great engineering programs. Mechanical engineering absolutely was one of them. Civil engineering, great engineering programs he could attend in Mass. They did not offer mechanical engineering technology. University of Maine happened to offer that specific major. Only one I could find that offered it. He paid a discounted tuition price. Families that use this program on average can save up to on average up to around $7,500 per year on tuition. Doesn't apply to everybody, right? If you go into a private school, doesn't apply. If he was going to be a mechanical engineer, wouldn't apply because UMass Lowell and UMass they have those great programs. But visit New England Board of Higher Education if your student wants to study something, and if you looked at our state school or your state school and you've ruled it out, look at the surrounding state schools. Maybe you can put them in the running that they weren't in the running before and save some money. So I think that concludes it. I think I've certainly
Yeah.
done enough talking. Always like to leave time for questions in case anybody has any at the end, or for you to just simply add anything I didn't cover during the presentation.
All right. Well, that's a unique picture here. You got us like four of us on there. Just a couple of things I wanted to touch base on. Is that in terms
Sorry.
of other ways of saving, and I know, Donald, you were very specific about things, but scholarships, um, making sure that your students apply for the scholarship. So here in Norton, we do kind of a large one-stop shopping for local scholarships that are connected somewhat to the high school or the community. It's kind of one Google form that we have the students fill out. We do it their senior year. We send it out the week before and go over it. Not just send it out. We go over it with them, usually in an LOB, which is our homeroom, what the process is, and then give them the week of February vacation and a few days after that to complete it. And we always encourage all students, even students that are going to technical schools, to apply and fill out the form. It takes them about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. It tops it. There's anywhere, depending on the year, between 50 and 70 or so different scholarships, kind of depends. But they're very, some of them are very specific. It goes to the son of a firefighter or daughter of a firefighter. That's the first thing, even over, GPA. So it's not just the top 20. So again, using our local forms, making sure that students fill that out. I've had a number of parents, students that the soccer board is going to offer one, and the kids played soccer, been captain of the soccer team, and then doesn't bother to fill out the form, and then doesn't get the scholarship. So, fill out those, have them fill out the scholarships. Our guidance department, each of our classes has a Google Classroom. Obviously, our junior and seniors get a lot of information about colleges, and we send out tons of information about local scholarships. We also have a large list of scholarships on Naviance. I'll give you an example. We had um, a community organization that's giving out a $4,000 scholarship. They didn't get it in on time for our larger scholarship, but we put it out 3 different times on our Google Classroom to the seniors. Talked to a number of seniors about it. One person filled out the scholarship. One out of our 100 and so kids that are going to college. She's going to get a $4,000 scholarship. She had no competition. Um, so if your parents out there, make sure you get your students to follow up and complete those scholarships. Most of them don't take that long. And a lot of times once you start filling them out, you have the information for the next scholarship coming down the pike. So I would really, really encourage that. The other thing I would say is that Donald has been fantastic. I was just telling him today that before we started the recording, that I had referred him to a person in town who I happened to be seeing at an event right before we started this night here, and he couldn't sing Donald's and his staff's praises enough. He had a pretty complex family situation with a number of kids in college, and he just said how helpful you were, and he has referred a number of people on to you as well. So if you are a AAA member and you have a student or students that are in college and you have questions, I can't say enough how helpful Donald has been to our staff, and I mean to our families and to me personally. So please reach out. With that, if there's any questions, you throw them in the chat or the Q&A. Not seeing any. Donald, I'm going to let you go. I thank you again for what is always an informative presentation, especially this year. I don't know if it's good or bad that you also struggled with that, with the FAFSA this year. Heard lots of stories. So if you're a parent
Yeah.
out there watching this tonight or on the recording and you struggled a little with the FAFSA as a senior parent, you are not alone. So again, I would encourage you to either reach out to Donald or to reach out to us. If you're not a AAA member, we do have some other resources we could send you to. So with that, I just again like to thank you, Donald, for taking the time, and everybody have a good night.
Welcome. Thank you.
All right, bye.